Welcome to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast with your host, legendary powerlifter and strength athlete, Chad Ikes. For most, the journey of strength starts in the gym, but should inevitably expand through all aspects of life. Join us as we discuss all things strength. Now, here's your host, Chad Ikes.
So tonight, normally I film these earlier in the day, but tonight we got, because of the time difference, Dr. Andrew Locke, who has been doing this for way longer probably than most people think, but come into light a little more recently. And it's kind of, he does a lot of stuff I worked in physical therapy. I never finished my schooling or anything, and as I went through my career, I was really into trying to move right and do things right. And that's kind of his specialty, is working with people, back, shoulders, you name it. He seems to work with it, and he's got a lot of people getting back to healthy.
That's my life.
So I really don't know all of your background. So kind of go into that and let my audience know kind of.
Well, it's an interesting one there, Chad. I really expected to be a professional baseball player. That was my life. So when I was about 12 years old, my parents hid my football boots and said, "You're not allowed to play football because you're probably going to hurt somebody." I was a little bit bigger, but I wasn't that big. And then they said, "You're going to play baseball." And I took to it stunningly. I ended up in the junior state representative team within about 3 years, and play for Australia in the inaugural World Youth Series in Newark, Ohio. There we go.
Really?
So I was playing for Australia, and as a result, schoolwork was fun, but it wasn't very important to me.
Yeah, I can sympathize with
that. So I had a good plan. I was going to be a professional baseball player, and I left school with the plan to just do that. Took a semi-professional job up in Darwin, up in the Northern Territory. That's where, if you watch your Crocodile Dundee stuff, that's where I was living.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I've seen snakes in bars, and I've seen water buffaloes on roads and crocodiles. Yep, I lived that life as a kid. But amongst that time, I fell out of love with the playing of baseball a little bit. At the same time, I saw a magazine with Arnold Schwarzenegger on it. So that ruined my baseball career. I decided I'd become the next Conan the Barbarian. And that never freaking worked, did it? So I decided to go back to school and ended up doing physical therapy. And it was a funny time, because when I came through and I did graduate, I went straight into the best sports medicine clinic in the country that was leading the world in shoulder rehab. Now, I went in there, and here's one for the audience. One of the greatest pieces of information I was ever given was given to me on the very first day that I entered practice. I walked into this eminent clinic where all the best surgeons were, doctors were, and the head of the clinic was a lady who was brilliant on shoulder diagnosis. So I walked into her office. She didn't tell me to sit down. She told me to just looked at me, and the look was very clear. "You stay standing." And she looked at me and said, "Your job here is to become the best in the world at something." And she goes, "And I'm the best in the world at shoulders, so piss off and do something else." Right, so that was the job. Now, that was the best information I ever got. Was I've just started my first day at work, and I am now told I have to become the best in the world at something. While I'm doing that, I had to learn a lot about shoulders. Well, that was a blessing in its own way, because I'd go into surgery, and the surgeons would be in there, and they'd be playing with anybody, like, what's this muscle here? What's that blood vessel there? What supplies this? What actions? They're just having fun because they're bored, because they know what they're doing. But you're sweating when you're in there, especially as a new grad. But one thing I noticed was they thought sport meant running, bike riding, basketball, maybe football, cricket, but no one knew what a bench press was. And there I was at the best sports medicine clinic back last century.
Really?
And here was I, weight training fairly heavily, decided to become a pro bodybuilder, which I never did. And I had to figure out how to apply shoulder rehab to basically weight trainers. And back then, there was no specialist in our country for sure who knew what to do. And that was my gift as well. I had to develop shoulder rehab for weight trainers. And that's how I came up with a lot of the work that I did and still progress even today. And that was the thing. And then, of course, what was I going to be the best in the world at? Well, I decided to go and give myself a huge back injury. If you've ever seen, I was doing one arm dumbbell rows. I did 200 pounds with my right hand, 10 reps. Rolled it over, picked up, did 9 reps on the left hand. And on the 10th rep, I blew that disc like no one blows disc. It was a beauty. When the surgeon who had an opinion had a look at the MRI, he started to get his tissue out and wipe it because he thought someone had sneezed on the MRI. And that's how much shit came out of my disc. I couldn't walk properly for 2 years. So you can tell there's a gift of injury. When you have something that's significant that you're told to have surgery, but you haven't got time for it, you learn a lot. And that was my mission then, to become the best in the world at back problems. Meanwhile, I'm the only guy who knows how to fix up a bench press as well. So it all came together. I had one mission in life: to become the best weight training, essentially rehab guy. Now, my work is, I always say, I'm the best in the world at basics. My job is to figure out the problems that nobody else figures out. After that, I just send you back to the trainers, and I send you back to the other people who are supervising you. And I figure the problem out. I give the directions, and away we go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a guy who figures out the stuff other people don't figure out.
That's that's actually really interesting though, because like basically you kind of found a niche, but you found a niche by what the sport that you loved, and then hurting yourself.
Oh, who of us hasn't hurt themselves? And it was a fun one. Blaine Sumner is a good friend of mine, and we were chatting not long ago as he was doing some work, and he said how he was doing really well at the moment. And he goes, "But I'm not pain-free." And I said to him, "When was the last time you were pain-free, Blaine?" And he just laughed, because it's right. He played college football. He was squatted 515 kilos. Pain-free? No, that's not our life to be pain-free, but we manage ourselves. So the expectation of pain-free, not always what we're going to expect in the elite athlete.
Yeah.
Your general pop person, yeah, all right, we'll get you generally pain-free. But with the elite, there's a management process, and that's what we really deal with. You've been through that.
Yeah, well, I mean, even like when I train people and they're like, "Oh, I'm sore." I'm like, "I've been sore since I was 12. Like I've lifted continuously nonstop. Like that's just part of life to me." And a little twinge or a little pain is like, that's what happens when you ask a lot of your body. Like it's normal.
You get to know that, and you get to know what's not a problem, and you get to know what's telling you there could be a problem. And that's such an important distinction for us. Is we are people who know when it's not a problem and it's part of the process. And we know when there's a problem and it's out of that process. And that's where we've really got to address it.
So do you find, because I know there's a lot of athletes, and I've had injuries myself where I went, should have paid attention to that.
Yep.
Is that like, do you help your clients with like noticing, like, listen, this is the normal pain, this is the not normal pain?
Very much. I do have some things which I believe you can prevent yourself having a disc injury as long as you do a couple of simple tests before you start training. And the day those tests say they're not moving as well as they should, you don't put the load on until they move as well as they should. And I've never had anybody get re-injured who did that process.
Which completely makes sense to me. And I know when I was coming up, I come from a blue collar background, very proud of how hard you can work and getting the job done no matter what. And I took that into my training. And when I got to sit down with guys like Ed Coan and Steve Goggins, and I kept hearing from all these top athletes, like, yeah, there's days where you come in and do it and it doesn't feel right. And you need to listen to your body. And that always confused me at the time, because I'm like, well, what do you mean? You mean you did it later? You mean you came back the next day? Like, what do you mean? And they're like, no, something's wrong and you need to pay attention to it.
I can remember Ed saying one day when someone was talking about their program, and something about how the 10th rep or something on that was just where they failed. And Ed sort of said, "Why didn't you just do 9 and tell the coach you did 10?"
Yeah, I think there's that point, and I think that's hard for a lot of lifters, especially with my young lifters now. I try to kind of start coaching that concept of like, yeah, you need to push hard, but there's a point where it's not smart to go past that.
Certainly is, and of course, that's where the social media virus, unfortunately, has influenced a lot of younger people coming in because they're getting their first information from people they shouldn't be getting their first information from. What did we first come up and see? We were lucky. You got your Powerlifting USA magazine, you probably got your Sports Illustrated if you're into something else. And the only people who got to write in Powerlifting USA or got to write in any journal or art magazine we would get access to was somebody who was already a decent world champion and had the backup. You didn't get to write with authority unless you had the authority. Now, start yourself an Instagram with a really cool name, and you're off and running, and suddenly you think you're an expert.
Yeah, buy yourself 100,000 followers, and everybody thinks you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's the tough one for the younger people coming in, is they're going to see a lot of footage which really isn't reflective of the process. So that's why I always say, you want to get your information, find out who's won multiple world championships, because not only have they won one, they've won a few. They're showing longevity. Now you'll see wisdom at the top of the mountain.
I had Matt Wenning on just recently, and I know you guys have done some seminars. I would love to actually go to one of those one time. He was talking about that too. He goes, I want to follow the guy that was a top lifter and is now a little bit older and still healthy and still lifting.
Yeah,
that's the guy I want to get some advice from.
Such genius there. I mean, Matt's wonderful. Yes, I'm going to be back doing a workshop with Matt. I think we're going to do lower back over 2 days, I expect, in October in Columbus. So we'll do that one. We've done our shoulder one.
I think it's interesting because of I didn't follow through with my physical therapy degree because I got really frustrated with the fact that I felt like physical therapy was about fixing everything after it was screwed up. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If these people would have done this, or this, they probably would have never got hurt. And
well, I also have a thought that, Chad, and it's one observation I've made. No one's ever come into my practice and sat down in front of me and I said, "So what's your problem?" And they go, "No, I got no problems. I just thought I'd come in and say hi." Anyone who comes to see me has got a problem.
That's true. But I wanted to and I took that into my training is it's like, no, I need to keep mobility. I need to keep flexibility. And I was able to get through lifting like I did with very few major injuries. I mean, granted, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time, I think. Sure. But I think that helped me keep the injuries to a minimum. And then when I did get them, I'm usually able to figure them out fairly quickly and work through them.
So how long did it take you to figure out maybe those things were important? Because that's not a very common finding for at least a couple of years.
No, I actually did from the very beginning because of my physical therapy background. I mean, granted, wow. I mean, I didn't find powerlifting until I was 27.
Right. Yeah.
So from like 12 to going into college, I just lifted like a madman, and I did all kinds of stuff that was horrible for me. But then I kind of when I finally got in after physical therapy, I started going, wait a minute, if this works here, why won't this help me in the gym? And why shouldn't I work these rotator cuff muscles to keep them strong? And then I kind of expanded that. And then when I got into physical therapy, it was like, this is something I'm going to lift. I think I can be good. I think I'm going to lift massive weights. I need to take care of myself. Like, I don't want to do this and not be able to walk at 50.
Well, I don't think that's in any physical therapy course in any country in the world at the moment. But they seem to be graduating everybody to call themselves a doctor of physical therapy now. And they haven't got the slightest idea about what it is to put a human being under load and to assess movement. They're taught to read a research paper that they don't even understand in the first place. They just read the conclusions.
Well, and I think a lot of it too is like, oh, you have this older person that's screwed up. Try to get them back to somewhat normal. It's not even, I'm like, no, shouldn't you get them back to normal and then teach them how to not let this happen again? That's not even in the program.
Yeah, normal's the base level. It's then above that we do everything. Yeah, that's the whole point of our work is normal's not what we deal with. We deal with abnormal people with abnormal goals.
But even at that, I mean, even if I was a normal person, I would rather come to somebody like you than a regular physical therapist. I'd be like, man, if you can help like these huge guys, I'll be easy for you.
Pretty much. That's about how it is too. Well, that's what my girl Julie always says to me. She goes, "Stop telling people it's simple." Well, okay, it took me 20 plus years to find out it was simple,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes 20 years of going to it to figure out how to see it simply. So it's a complex issue until you're experienced enough to know it's not complex.
That completely makes sense to me, but I could see where some people are probably going, "What?" But yeah, because
That,
we tend to overanalyze everything and we want to know everything we can, and then you kind of get to a point where it's like, wait a minute, this all really kind of makes sense.
that's like lower back problems. I mean, seriously, I spent 3 years with human cadavers. I know there's nothing under there that I haven't seen or cut up and removed at some point.
Mm-hmm.
There's no mysterious stuff there. Now, if you know what's there, well, you should know how it behaves. And fortunately, physics gives you a fairly good indication.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a biological system that operates under the laws of physics. Well, shit, I got to tell you, that's pretty straightforward. Human beings move in 3 planes of motion: forward, backward, side to side, and rotation. And some sports have combinations of those things. Mostly powerlifting, you got forward, backward control.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once you understand that and you understand the movement aggravators and triggers, and you know the things that ease it off, you strengthen the things that are weak and you keep the things strong that are strong. And that's why I call it simple.
So in powerlifting, I've kind of noticed this over the years. A lot of powerlifters, especially the better they get, the more they stick to like the basic lifts and they
Mm.
stop moving in other directions.
Specificity.
And
You
it's,
only got time for that.
but don't you think that, do you think that, I should say, do you think that causes some injuries later? I mean, if you're never doing any rotation, like, isn't it kind of just a matter of time till something gets out of whack?
Pretty much spot on. I can't remember the first 400 kilogram plus lifter I met, except for one, who could do a side plank when I first asked him to do a bodyweight side plank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can put 400 kilos on their shoulders and they can go down and come back up with it. But shit, they can't lie on their side and lift their hips up and hold that position. So good in the sagittal plane.
Right.
Now, imagine if we just bolt on some strength in the frontal plane. Yeah, well, it makes a huge difference as well.
Yeah. I've seen 1,000-pound squatters that can't do like one split squat.
I'm sure, absolutely.
And you're like, in my mind, I'm going, wow, this, and I've done some of this stuff too. I kind of let my rotation go at one point.
Mhm.
But learning it, you're like, okay, at some point this is going to catch up with me. I may be getting away with it now, but at some point the imbalance is going to be so bad that it's going to cause something.
And that's why Eddie Cohen lasted more than 10 years at the top, is because when he'd finish a comp, he wouldn't do the comp lifts anymore. He did all the accessory work that was required to get ready for the next comp. So he trained like a bodybuilder in his off season, addressing all the perceived weaknesses that he had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then come back to comp training, get back onto a linear pattern again and linear progression. There we are. It was that's why he was so well put together. It was, I finished the comp now. What could I do better? Well, I've got to do these things before I go back to those comp lifts.
Mm-hmm.
There's a wisdom to that.
I've seen a lot of guys go from one linear to the next linear to the next linear to the next linear. And
I've seen a lot.
you're literally just strengthening the same muscles.
Yeah, that's where we are. So it is a matter of, that's my motto of my work is weakness cannot be tolerated.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you find something that's strong, such as if you got tight hip flexors, well, they're doing a good job then, aren't they? So I don't want to get rid of those. What's weak that's causing them to be tighter? Well, it's usually going to be the opposite muscle group,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be your hip extension. So get your lazy ass doing some strong hip extension work, and don't stretch your goddamn hip flexors because they're doing you a service. You'll find they appreciate the fact you just bolted on some more strength. Never get rid of your strengths. Always appreciate them. Now find your weaknesses,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you need to spend time doing.
Yeah, and I think because I think that kind of rolls a little bit into technique, where people will if their technique's bad, they'll just think about, well, I just need to focus on that. And it's like, well, wait a minute, why is it bad? Like, what's going on
Oh,
that you need to
so
fix
good.
so that it's not that way?
You've got the perfect word you brought straight out there, and that's the most important 3 letters. Why?
Yeah.
Why? You don't. That's why I say pain is a symptom. It's not a cause. And I don't treat pain. I want to know why the pain's there. I treat the cause of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So you find the people who do the hands-on therapy, I mean, that's nice and it has its place for making you feel better, but it never addresses the cause of why you've got that problem. And that's where you dig deep. You've got to say why. And you don't start the pain relief unless you have the why it's there in the first place.
That you just hit on one of my really big pet peeves. Like people that will go in and they're like, oh, I got to roll out before I can squat. And so it gets them to a little bit of pain relief. So they're able to squat that day. And then all of a sudden, rolling out is now part of their training. And it's like, all you did is relieve some pain. You didn't fix the problem. Like, step back and fix the problem, and then you won't have to roll out.
And there's the have to part of it. So if you understand the cause and you're going to address that, I'll let your foam roll then if it's part of your mental preparation for getting prepared to do the work, but you're doing that in the framework of addressing the problem as well.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the great people that we deal with, it's not uncommon. They they got busy days, whatever they've been doing, and so when they come in, they need to get their head focused on where they're going. And maybe foam rolling or lying on the roller just gets them away from their outside world long enough to say, I'm here in the gym now.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I look at that and I say, okay, if that's what you want to do, I'm fine with that. But now, of course, you've got those activations to do. So I have a little mantra that says, activate, warm up. It's activate, mobilize, warm up, train. So you got to do your activations that's specific to your work. You got to do the mobility work that's necessary to allow you to perform what you're going to do. Then you get onto your warm up for the program.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to programming. Yeah,
So,
and you can't negotiate.
So with the activation point, is that you're basically activating until the muscle's functioning properly, or is that something you like to have them keep doing for an extended period of time?
It doesn't usually take too much. There's essentially activation is a shortening of the word post-activation performance enhancement, which is it's basically a fact of physiology, post-activation performance enhancement. So if I got a person who's got knee valgus in a squat, I'm going to give them an activation that essentially is made for the glute muscles,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to be in the pattern of knee opening, but it's going to be lying on the ground probably and getting that muscle in a position where it's the dominant muscle. It's going to do multiple high rep work because there's no load, so you don't have to recover from it. But now that muscle is prepared that it's got to perform work. And then you put it into the pattern. So it might then be, if you got a knee valgus, you do your special lock clams, which I start with, and then you go sit them on a bench with a band around their knees into the squat position where they probably have the failure, and you get them working from that position with the band.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can take the band off and you can be training, or you leave the band on while you're putting your warm-up sets on. So all you're doing is activation, is simply getting the muscle excited to contribute to the pattern. There's a really great example of what happened there. It was a lady who I had contact me during the COVID experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
She'd flown back from South America to Sydney, and that was about 30 hours of sitting down on planes and probably in economy too, all right? So she's probably squashed up there, getting on buses, getting in taxis. So the first thing she does after 30 hours of doing that, I should go to the gym. Good idea. What exercise should I do? I'll do deadlifts. Well, she walks up to the bar with a very moderate weight on it, in a good position, stands up, and she rips both her hamstrings off the bone, including a piece of bone on each one. Because her ass was basically turned off. It really had been sitting on it for 30 hours. So when you stand up coming over a deadlift and your hips are supposed to extend, shit, well, who's going to do the work? The hammies did.
You just completely overloaded them.
Now, it would have taken seriously 5 minutes of work maximally to have prevented that. That's the value of where, yes, we do need to activate.
So do you think like a normal person, not overtrained and they're healthy, are there certain muscles like the glutes that you need to activate? I mean, if she hadn't done all the traveling and stuff, I mean,
Sure.
normally, like, I guess what I'm asking is the normal healthy body. I know that's funny because we're never normal and happy, but are normal and healthy. But like, is there a point where like, if everything's going good, you might not need some activation, or are there some muscles that specifically really you should always kind of try to do some sort of activation to?
Well, put it this way, if you're a hunter-gatherer running around on the outback and running around the African savannah, you probably don't need to activate. But if you've been sitting on your ass for 8 hours a day, that's not an evolutionary posture that you're supposed to be in. 90 degrees of hip flexion. We evolved as an apex predator who walks on 2 legs. Took us 21 million years to get to that point from our first ancestor that actually demonstrates that it might have stood upright. About 600,000 years ago, approximately, 4 to 6, Homo sapiens appears. That's you and me. Well, we didn't appear sitting on our ass in a chair, because if we did, we would have starved to death. So our particular body shape has a curvature in the lumbar spine that is supposed to walk. It's our advantage over the other animals, plus our brains. So we're supposed to be walking, running, hunting, throwing. Well, we're not doing that in the 21st or 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
We're on our ass, working away on our PCs. We're working away, sitting in trucks, and we're not in the position we evolved to be in. So every normal person who sits down for work, yeah, you better do some activation, because you need to restore the hunter-gatherer before you load the hunter-gatherer.
A great way to explain that, and it totally makes sense, yes.
It does, doesn't it?
So like, even if you are kind of healthy, you're still not treating the body the way it's supposed to be treated, and you're going to have to activate these things.
Absolutely imperative. There it is. You're a hunter-gatherer who sits on their ass. Well, before you start training, how about restore the hunter-gatherer? Doesn't take long. Get some muscle groups working that should have been working in real life, and then you start to load it, and you will go very well. You won't get hurt.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now I'm thinking on as your clients go and evolve, it's like, once you've done that a couple times and you've felt it and felt how it feels when everything activates, you should kind of learn that if you come in and just start, be like, oh shit, I forgot my stuff because this feels like crap. And then go back and hit those activations of those muscles.
Yeah, until it feels like it should. That's right.
And see, that's funny to me, because, I always tell people all the time, I go, powerlifting is not about, it's about strength, but the main goal is not strength. The main goal is to lift as much fucking weight as you possibly can. I've beaten people that are stronger than me because I had better technique than them. So if you go in to do your deadlifts and your glutes aren't working, you cannot show how strong you actually are.
There it is. Yeah. Maximal display of possible technique. As we know, the best deadlifters all have humongously strong hip extension in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who get hurt, their hips rise because they can't get out of that position. And then they put their back into a position which they're going to lift out of their back.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Do that with enough load, frequently enough, and you're setting yourself up, if you're genetically predisposed, to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's most people.
Well, it's interesting. There's a in strength sports, and I found this kind of interesting because I also train a couple of professional arena football players, and having a power lifter and a football player next to each other is really interesting. And, like, I was talking to my one football player, Hunter, the other day, and I was talking about how a lot of guys just want to train heavy all the time. They don't care about technique. They don't care about injuries. They don't care about overtraining. They just want to pound weight, which I get because I love pounding weight. But like, my one football player is like, dude, if you told me to take time off, I'd be like, how long? He's like, I want to play football. I don't give a shit. I'm training so I can play football. Like, you tell me I need a break, I'm gone. I tell a power lifter, I'm like, dude, you need to back off for a week. They're like, no, I can't do that. And I go, it's a really different dynamic. And I think sometimes strength athletes get so caught up in trying to get stronger that they're not paying attention to like the activation of those muscles. Are like one of the biggest setbacks for a lifter is getting hurt. Like
The biggest, yeah.
that's going to slow your gains down more than anything. So why not spend a little extra time, do a little more research, a little more understanding to try and not get hurt?
An interesting one there would be your own experience. When you were competing at your best,
Mm-hmm.
when was your last heavy session prior to comp?
2 weeks.
Yeah. So essentially you're saying I'm taking 2 weeks off to be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the example of what it's like at absolute limits.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, you realize the value of the wave cycling.
Mm-hmm.
The fact you need to deload your axial loading at certain points to allow yourself to recover. Because if you don't recover, well, you just start building upon that and you start eating away at it.
Well, I think
Yeah,
that
what-
I think that kind of brings up something too. Is I seen, and I see this actually. This was one of the problems I had in physical therapy too. Is people will get injured, and then they don't want to take time off, so they go to the gym and then they work around their injuries, but then they create horrible movement patterns, and they're pulling up the wrong muscles. And now they have a horrible movement pattern, but they finally start feeling good. And now they're going to go heavier with horrible movement patterns, which again is going to lead to the same injury or possibly another one.
Absolutely guaranteed. That's why there is this absolute stupidity that's going through a lot of very uneducated coaches because of social media saying, just load it, it adapts. Well, shit doesn't sometimes adapt. That's how you get fractures,
Mm-hmm.
because there are certain limits. And don't be a dumbass and say the word Wolff's Law to me, anyone out there, because you don't understand Wolff's fucking law, okay? I can tell you what Wolff's Law was, and that was back in the 1800s, and it's got to do with the femoral neck in juveniles. That's all Wolff's Law is. It's not bending over and picking up a weight. That is not Wolff's Law. And so discs also don't have a blood supply. So when you injure a disc significantly enough, you never return to the same disc. You now have a disc material that has to weld up. It's different tissue to what it was to begin with. And the degenerative cascade will begin. There is not a single case in recorded history of somebody who had a significant disc injury who didn't have degeneration afterwards. It doesn't adapt to get better if you want to load that thing up.
So
Yeah,
basically,
imagine.
once your disc blows, it's never going to be the same.
It's never going to be the same, but that doesn't mean you won't set a world record.
Right.
Because look at what Brian Carroll, was it 2008?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's got a lovely disc extrusion. There's crap everywhere. He's got fractures of his sacrum and his spine, but he ends up squatting 1,306 in 2020.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, correct me. I had actually a girlfriend at the time who was a physical therapist, and she used to always tell her patients, she's like, I have 2 bulging discs. Like everybody over the age of like 45 has had disc issues. It doesn't,
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. Like, deal with it.
yeah, you can deal with it. Having that cascade does not stop you. I don't even have a disc left. It's bone on bone, right? It's fused itself. And throughout that period of going from disc extrusion all the way through to no disc at all and just fused up bone, there was no pain.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I knew what I was doing. I could strengthen things up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nothing. It doesn't limit you from having future success.
It's
No matter.
the human body is pretty amazing.
Oh, it certainly is. And if you are smart about it, or you find someone who is smart about it, then they'll guide you on that journey. And that's why it's not such an issue. Did you know lumbar spine fusion surgery has about a 50% failure rate over 5 years?
Really?
The next level will go, well, it's not a failure of the surgery. It's a failure of the crap rehab.
Ah,
Because
okay.
no one asked the question which you put up earlier, which was, why the hell did you need the first lumbar fusion? What are you doing wrong to set that up?
Mhm.
Well, the surgeon's fixed it up, but the rehab person hasn't gone and had a good assessment and examination saying, well, what are you doing and how are you moving that set that first one up? That's where it's not the surgeon's fault. It's the crap rehab that focuses on pain as the only guide. Oh, you're out of pain? You must be okay. No, you're still moving like shit.
Mhm.
Get ready for 5 years down the track. Or let's address your dysfunctions and let's prevent further problems. And that's where you're treating dysfunction and not pain. But most therapy seems to be focused on pain. And pain's only a symptom. It's not a diagnosis. The diagnosis is what set it up.
Well,
And that's my
in
job.
most cases, a lot of your pain isn't even in necessarily the area that's hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. You do a big disc and your calf hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good. The pain's only about 3 feet away from where you injured it. So that shows that
Yes.
your brain doesn't know where it is. And that's a classic, that's why I always bring out in my workshops. Pain location isn't a great indication of where the problem is.
Right.
You got pain in the front of the shoulder on your bench? Well, it's not your biceps tendon 99.99% of the time. It's your rotator cuff at the back that's pissed off. And the nerve that supplies them both, your brain gets the information and thinks it's your bicep tendon.
Yep.
And why is your rotator cuff pissed off? That's the big question. You've got to put the why in. That's because you got crap scapular control. You're weak in retraction.
That is.
Oh, that's why.
I talk about that one so much. I try to explain it because I think everybody should buy an anatomy book, and everybody should just go through every now and then and kind of look at it. Or even now, you can get some apps that have some really cool movement programs of the muscles and stuff. And I'm like, I keep telling people, I go, listen, your scap is your shoulder, right? Like, you do understand that. And they're like, what? What do you mean? That's my back. I go, but that's actually your shoulder. That's the cuff of your shoulder. That's the cup where the humerus goes in. So if you don't control that, your shoulder's going to eventually get screwed up.
And what do you control it with? The freaking muscles that attach to your spine.
Yeah. A lot of people can't grasp that idea.
The legendary Charles Poliquin said that famous saying, you cannot shoot a cannon out of a canoe.
Yeah.
And there it is.
That's physics. That's totally true.
You want to build an aircraft carrier back there. And that's what you're doing with your benching.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have great strength in scapular control. And then your rotator cuff is going to be very happy.
Yeah. I've always explained, I try to explain to people, like I do various ways. One of the ways is lay on the bench and I go, if your shoulders are loose, force is going behind you and force is going up. You want all the force going into that bar. And I go, it's the same thing if somebody walks in front of me and I shove them. If there's nothing behind me, part of my force is going to go backwards. But let me lean against a wall and walk in front of me and then let me shove you. Then all my force goes into you. I go, it's the same thing. If your shoulders are loose, you're losing energy. Energy is going everywhere but where you want it to.
And when we go back, that's Sir Isaac Newton wrote that in 1687.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a good one. In 1680, Giovanni Borelli wrote the first book on biomechanics. It preceded Newton by 7 years.
Really?
And who one of Borelli's teachers was? It was Galileo. Galileo taught physics to Borelli.
Really? I did not know.
Now you're going back. This is foundations of where we're sitting today talking. We're talking Borelli's biomechanics, and you've got to have a look at that. It's beautiful. He figured out the actual calculations of spine force in 1680.
Jesus.
He actually died on December 31st, 1679, just before it got published.
So they discovered that in the 1600s, and we're still having trouble getting people to understand it to this day.
Because no one in university is teaching that to your DPTs who are graduating. They don't know that reality has been established for about 400 years.
Wow. That's pretty fascinating.
It's awesome. We love this stuff. So I go to evolution. I go back to millions of years to understand how a human body got to where it is. Then I look at where the foundations of our knowledge come from. Yeah, it's all straightforward. It's set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
And we should have learned how to put that together as a strength science. And maybe we're doing that better now. Unfortunately, social media is now going to get in the way of that. because anybody can have an opinion, as we've said. And unfortunately, they're going to muddy the waters.
Yeah, I have a big issue with social media now and all the information that goes out there. And I kind of feel sorry for people because, like you said earlier, like when I grew up, you had very few magazines or books, and those were people that were highly educated. And then,
Yep.
like I tell people, even I didn't have a video to watch when I was a kid and I'm first learning exercises. I got a description which told me this works these muscles. Here's how you perform it. Here's a picture before, the middle, and after. And sometimes it was just before and after. Like I literally had to figure out how to do it, but I had a description. So instead of just watching a video, I went, okay, this is supposed to work my lats. Here, I'm going to do it. And I'm like, but I didn't feel my lats. Okay, well, maybe I did it a little. So I had to kind of play with it and use my own intelligence to go, here's the exercise. I know it's supposed to work this muscle. And nowadays, people see a movement on the internet and they're like, oh, that's cool. And they go do it. They don't know what muscles are supposed to work. They don't know how to perform it. It's just like, well, I saw it and it's cool, so I'm just going to go do it.
And that's pretty much a question my girl Julie was asking me the other day. What advice would you give if someone wanted to become a really good rehab professional who was just graduating? First piece of advice, get off social media and don't look at social media for 2 years. Don't Google search a damn thing. Go to and buy books by people who are authorities. You can go get Kramer and Zatskiorski's strength training. You can go and get McGill's book on biomechanics. You can get McKenzie's lumbar spine work. Don't go and chase social media. Don't search Google. Read people who have a hell of a lot of experience and show you how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 2 years, you'll be able to discern what you're going to see on social media.
I think that's totally true. I know when I first started powerlifting, I always trained by myself in my basement, and I started going to the gyms. And when I first started competing, I was taking advice from everybody in the gym. And eventually I went, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. I go, none of these people are where I want to go. Like some of them may be a little better than me, but like I'm new to this. Like, why am I listening to these people? I go, I need to find better people. And that's when I started reaching out to Dave and Wendler and just kept getting higher and higher. And I'm like, I want to go to the best, the people that have done it and coached it and helped other people. Like, why am I listening to these regular people? I don't want to be a regular person.
Perfect, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think just remembering when you're saying to people to get an anatomy book or a good anatomy app, there's one called the Anatomy Coloring Book. And that's the most beautiful book they can get because you're going to sit there and you color the things in and start figuring it out.
That's actually a really good idea.
It's a little bit easier to get through than picking up Gray's Anatomy, which I got a copy of. And, oh, God, yeah, you're just going to go, oh, shit, that's just dense. But the anatomy coloring book's going to be attractive. You're going to get your pen and pencil out and have fun.
And you're going to get a little meditation, but you're actually, as you're coloring that muscle, you get more time to look at it and think about what it's doing.
Brilliant. And think about the exercises you might be putting it into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I still think that's a big thing too, is like the mind muscle connection. And I know when I'm trying to get, like, for some reason, powerlifters hate doing rotator cuff work. Or they do goofy shit like this one where they're just pumping their hands like they're trying to fly or something.
We'll see it forever.
And yes, that one baffles me so much.
We're not getting rid of it. We might as well accept it. You got to see it.
But I mean, in order to do really good rotator cuff work, I think you've got to kind of have that mind muscle connection. You got to kind of understand, what am I working? My infraspinatus, my supraspinatus? Well, like, what am I working? And can I see it and understand that I'm not trying to use my deltoids or any other muscles to do this. I'm actually trying to get that specific muscle to work and make a connection. And then you can do surprisingly well if you can get that.
And my thought on that, get the real muscle connection between your scapula and your spine when you do your rotator cuff work.
Mm-hmm.
So you're learning to stabilize before you implement the distal work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So work that scapulothoracic work, implement it, lock it down. Now let's put your glenohumeral work in on top of it. Because that's how you're going to bench.
Yes,
you're going to lock in tight. You're going to get those lats on. So when you're rotator cuff working, don't activate from the outside in, activate from the inside out. Scapulothoracic.
Stabilize the shoulder first, then work
Yeah.
on moving the humerus. Totally makes
Beautiful.
sense. Yeah.
Go from the middle outwards. I told you it's freaking easy.
And it's funny because I have like with especially this is funny because I work that whole area. That whole scapular area is super important to me. And so like I'll have a client come in. I had one of my clients, he's 74, ex contractor, been in labor. Just he was all hunched over when he first came in. And like he has all these shoulder problems. And like the first thing I do is like, dude, you gotta open up, man. And he literally had almost no control of his scaps. Like even working on scap retraction, I had to start by grabbing his shoulders and go pull like this. Pull. It's like I had to retrain his muscles to actually work. And I don't know if that's today people looking at their phones and they're always hunched over or what it is. But even some of the bench pressers, like I have a new bench presser I'm starting to train now. And I'm like, dude, your rhomboids and your middle and low traps are weak as shit. Like, how do you already bench 350 and you're just weak as shit?
And you get ready to hit the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got natural talent, and natural talent's great, but it never beats hard work, and it never beats smart hard work.
Mm-hmm.
So as always said, the bigger your back, the better your bench is probably going to get.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I tell people about that too. I'm like, dude, look at Ryan Kennelly. I go, Ryan had a big chest. He had big biceps. I go, but when you looked at his back, his fucking back was huge.
And that's what you wanted. When you saw that, you stopped looking at the chest and arms. You looked, I want a back like that.
Mm-hmm. And you look at like Kazmar and John Paul Sigmason and like, I mean, you're like, dude, these guys back, like you could fit your hand like in the groove between all the muscle and shit in their thoracic and their rhomboids and everything.
That's always the key hallmark of a true strong athlete, how big their back is.
That was when I was throwing in college. My coach was alternate javelin thrower at the Olympics, so he was friends with like Randy Barnes and like all these top throwers. And he would always tell me, he go after the summer at like our first competition, they would grab each other's hand and shake their hand, and then they would feel around to their low back. And they'd be like, oh, you worked hard this summer. Or like, dude, you slacked off this summer, didn't you? Like, they didn't give two shits about the front muscles. They're like, I'm going to grab your back and I'll know what you've been doing all summer.
Yeah, there it is. Because that's the thing that's going to make the difference. You're going to make it. Yeah, back is key. And then you go to the glutes then. So you got your back, you got your glutes. Yeah, then you better get some abs, and you're probably starting to look pretty good because everything else is okay.
It's the same thing with sprinters. People look and go, oh, that sprinter's got big thighs. I'm like, his thighs aren't that big. I go, his hamstrings and glutes are freaking huge.
As a hallmark of an athlete, when they're on the decline, especially fighters, you look at their legs.
Mm-hmm.
And when those legs start to go, you know the career's gone.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it as an athlete. The legs are always the key to when I look at an athlete who's coming back, who might have had layoff. Look at the legs. If they're not back, he's not back.
Right.
And I saw that with a lot of great people who come back. Yeah, no legs. Not going to trust that one's going to last very long.
It's all what do they say? Like 3-to-1 back to anterior to posterior.
That's Matt Wenning's approach.
Mm-hmm.
Three times the pull to the push ratio. And well, he didn't get injured when he was spending his time at the top. So you got to look at it and say, there's some value to that. Yeah. I tend to say 2-to-1. And a lot of good coaches will say 1-to-1. But at least there's a ratio there of some balance.
Right.
And, you know, as Matt would say, 3-to-1. No, I think he's got the runs on the board that I'm going to listen to him.
Yeah, Matt put up a bunch of crazy numbers, and he's still really healthy and actually dropped some weight. He's still strong, even dropping weight and healthy. And like, I mean, yeah, you got to look at I don't know how you couldn't look at a guy like that and go, yeah, I can learn something from that guy.
Hell yeah. And he's got a master's degree in biomechanics. And he's just written a book on conjugate training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're going to learn a lot from Matt.
It's funny. I think, especially because I think me and you are about the same age. I'm 52.
I'm 21.
You look 21. That's what I was going to guess 22, but 21. And, you know, there was kind of, when I came up, there was kind of this error of like, we didn't care. I mean, I cared, but there was a lot of guys that if they destroyed themselves, they didn't give a shit.
Hey,
And I'm
get a
like,
gold medal.
but how, if you destroy yourself, that doesn't give you the longevity in the sport, and strength takes forever. Like you got to kind of think like health and at some point, I mean, I know some throwers that by the time they were in their 50s are so beat up they're in wheelchairs, and some old power lifters like that. And I go, I never wanted that.
No. Everyone has a different mentality and a different way to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are going to be happy winning that world championship and tearing themselves apart. Now, look at Ronnie Coleman, for example. Yep, as he said, if I could do it again, I'd do it harder.
Yeah, he probably would. But see, that's where I go, I want to do it smarter.
Yeah. I'm with you. That's why I was told when I was training at one of the gyms, and I was training with a guy who ended up winning the Masters Olympia. And the guy, one of the coaches there, he said, man, you'll never be a pro bodybuilder. You think too much. And that was a fair call.
Maybe not.
For me, it was. Definitely got in the way.
Thinking too much?
Yeah, way too much. Thinking about too many angles, too many things. Should have worked harder.
Well, I mean, you still gotta, you can't get around the work.
No. And there's the one thing, like my daughter's a very good jiu-jitsu athlete. Problem is, she's been competing since she was about 12 and she's 27 now. But there was a point there where she was about 18. And the thing is, she'd won over 100 comps, I think, by that point. And she was just too fucking talented. So when it finally came up against someone who was less talented, but had worked harder, that's where the confrontation came. That confronts the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And that was too hard for her to take for a long time. Was that talent took me this far, and yeah, I worked really hard, but then I came against someone who wasn't as talented, but wanted it more.
Mm-hmm.
And to go to the next level, that's really where it goes. When you combine hard work with talent, great. But talent can be a real curse, especially with young lifters. You're looking great. You're lifting a lot. You got a lot of talent. But when the shit gets to a grind, well, that's when it's going to really start to matter, because that's your career starting.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I think, as you kind of, if you take powerlifting, you get to the mid-level and you get a lot of guys that had talent and they got there on their talent. And now it's like, now you're against a bunch of guys that are working their asses off. So your talent is not going to get you further. Now it's going to take the work.
Yeah. And you'll find that coming out of college and going into the pros.
Mm-hmm.
The pros are your sharks, and you got a long way with talent. But suddenly you find hard work is the next level.
Yeah. And I think, and then you go to guys like Ed Coan, who you go, this is a guy that had the talent, had genetics, and worked hard and worked smart. And that's why he's the GOAT, because he didn't, there's no holes. He was doing everything.
Yep. Well, there's the perfect combination for anyone who wants to be known through further history. Smart, talent, hard work. There it is. Mm-hmm. It's a combination of all those things. Don't just be an Instagram sensation because you did something once.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow, no one cares.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, strength sports is still like, people, it fades fast in strength sports.
Hell yeah. Doesn't it, huh? It's an amazing thing. Strength is one of the great sciences, I think. It's one of the great sciences of applying a load to a human body and seeing how you can perform and move that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the absolute limits. Now, a different thing too is, what are absolute numbers? Well, let's look at the absolute squat records. Let's look at something like Blaine with 515 kilos, Vlad Alizov.
And that was in single ply gear.
Yeah.
Blaine.
It's phenomenal. You look at all the top lifters who are lifting well over 400 kilos. If you look at their knee position, it doesn't vary a 16th or a 64th of an inch, because under that load, it can't valgus. Or else we just said about Newton's 3 laws of motion. As soon as you start losing that position, that load's going to break you.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone who's got that squat level has perfect mechanics for them. But that is it also must be perfect mechanics. It's also going to be knee is going to be definitely over your ankle as far as that sagittal plane goes.
Mm-hmm. I
Now,
completely agree.
go get yourself a few of the world champion lightweights, especially say females. Now they might be playing with 200 kilograms and the knees are coming in. Well, yeah, that's less than half the absolute load that a body has to be able to handle.
Mm-hmm.
That's theirs, but their body is resilient enough to take some load or to take some technique variability. But you can't go higher without better technique.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where absolutes give us the facts of lifting. So you want to see what a lift should look like? Look at the biggest lifts.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't have crap technique. You can't be a 64th of an inch off, or else it's not going to work. But you can get away with variability under a lighter weight, even
Yes.
a lighter body weight. And people mistake that. No, always look at absolute load for what technique should look like.
Mm-hmm. I've said that from the beginning, like back, like I had a friend one time, Cyril Lewis, one of the guys, strong guy when I first started. And I was at some point, he does like an 800-pound squat. And I'm like, holy shit, dude. I go, you just did like an 800-pound good morning. I go, that's crazy. You are definitely stronger than me. Then I went out and squatted 850. And I think that's a lot. And then as you go, I remember talking to Andy Bolton one time. And because I was asking him about when he pulls. And he would kind of feel like each little kind of like where he starts to pull, he's feeling it. And he's feeling it. And even he said at the time, he goes, if I pull it 2 inches and it don't feel right, I'm not even going to try. Because he goes, at 1,000-pound deadlift, he goes, my window for error is so
Zero.
small. Yeah, zero. And I've said that. I go, man, when you squat 400 pounds, your window for error is huge. You squat 6, it gets a little closer. You squat 7, it gets a little closer. You're up around 1,000, there ain't much room for error anymore.
So if you want to squat 1,000 and at the moment you're squatting 2, squat it like it's 1,000.
Yes. That was Ernie. It was Ernie France, I believe, said, treat the lightweights like they're heavy and the heavyweights like they're light.
Beautiful, isn't it? It so encapsulates reality.
And that brings me back to Ed Coan too, because when I first started lifting, I went and got Ed Coan's his VHS tape.
I've still got it.
And one of the first things I saw is I'm like, man, he looks the same all the time. Like I'm rewinding and fast forwarding, and I'm like, his 135 looked like 1,000-pound squat. Like they're exactly the same. And I thought, there's something to this. Like that, there's something to technique, there's something to how you lift, and there's something to this consistency.
You're seeing it, Chad. You're seeing it early.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah, there's an interesting one. Was it Benedict Magnuson?
Mm-hmm.
Someone said to him about, like he had the heaviest deadlift, right? Raw. Now, we'll look at Benny, and someone said about the rep, and he goes, yes, that's always my second rep. So essentially what he was saying is your second rep often in training is better than your first rep when you're doing a double. You get that first one up, the second one is always better. So when you see him warming up and getting prepared to lift the bar, he's just doing the first rep in his head. When he takes the second bar off the ground, that's his second rep.
I really like that. I've never heard him say that. I really like that. So that throws in visualization, which I'm very big on to begin with. But yes, I'm always telling people, I'm like, dude, your second one was easier, but you got to pull your first one into meat. And the reason your second one's good is because you have an eccentric phase and you're usually paying attention to how you're setting it down. So your starting position is much better. So instead of just cranking out reps, start visualizing your body and your mind and find that second position to be on your first one.
There it is. You and Benny have come to the same conclusion.
And I think, didn't Benny start? I thought I read something that he started lifting because he hurt his back in a car accident.
I think I heard that too, yeah.
So there's another one. Just because you hurt your back, that's bull. If you're going to like whine the rest of your life because your back's hurt, shut the fuck up. Like you can get better and get stronger.
Yeah, there's a way. And it's not always an easy way, but there is an answer out there.
Yeah. I loved watching Benny. He attacked the bar. I love the way he attacked the bar.
Oh, man, it reminded me of the famous wrestler Brute Bernard. You got to go back into history and watch Brute Bernard.
I don't remember that name. We're talking like professional wrestler type.
It was like the WWF, WWE.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
He was one hard man, and the end of his life was fairly hard as well because someone told him wrestling was fake when he was in a bar. So he pulled out a gun with 6 bullets in it and took one out the chamber and played Russian roulette. That was the end of Brute.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I guess he went out in a blaze of glory. I suppose.
Some legends out there.
That's funny. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, if you had general advice for powerlifters to help ward off injuries, what would that? Can you sum it up in like 1 or 2 things?
Yeah. Watch Ed Cohen. In other words, as you said, make your first rep like your last rep. Treat the light weights like they're heavy weights. Technique is the overall ruling aspect of your future success. So ego is wonderful. Ego will take you a lot of places. Put your ego and let's strap it into good technique.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes 10,000 repetitions of anything to become even vaguely competent at it. So if you're going to start deadlifting today, don't try and max out until you've done 10,000 reps for me. And that was an interesting one in regard to spines, is that I had mentioned this to Ed. I said I didn't think a person should be allowed to do a max deadlift with less than at least 18 months of training. And Ed said he thought 3 years.
Really?
You hadn't earned the right because your body hadn't actually got to the point where it was resilient enough and it had adapted enough to take the load. So the personal trainer who decides to get a young mother in who wants to get stronger and decides to set up the video for Instagram to see what her personal best is within a month of training, you're just setting that person up for an end plate fracture because the end plates of the bones are not adapted to axial load. It's dangerous and it's going to do nothing good for that person's future. I ban them. You're not allowed to do a deadlift single max at least for 18 months. You haven't earned the right.
Yeah, that's so you're saying like not only the ligament and tendon strength building up, but the bone itself getting dense enough and strong enough to handle, because the stress of having your body upright and then bending over with that weight is probably, I mean, if I was a great physics guy, I could probably work that equation out like the other guy you talked about. But I mean, it's going, the more you bend over and the more weight, that exponentially goes that stress exponentially goes up.
Well, you see these bones there?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big vertebrae. Now that's where the weight's got to go through.
Right.
You don't want it coming through little joints at the back here.
Right.
When Blaine Sumner fractured his spine doing 515 kilos in a squat at the Arnold's,
yeah.
When Blaine stepped out, he stumbled, and that's what happened.
Oh, so he broke like the back spine of the vertebrae.
Yeah, he fractured what we call the pedicle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was 715 kilos essentially in a single leg stance moment. Well, bone doesn't appreciate it back here, but you can put that through here.
Right.
Because it's huge. But here has actually got a smooth cartilage on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that smooth cartilage is very flexible. And so the disc can actually herniate up into the disc, up into the bone.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Here, I'll give you a quick one. The 3 ways to injure a lower back. 1, flexion, that direction,
mm-hmm.
under load when your disc is under the conditions. There's your disc bulge.
Okay, yeah.
That's how it occurs.
Posteriorly.
It's simple. That's how it goes. Load here, fluid goes that way.
Mm-hmm.
Load down through this direction, straight down there. There's your roof tiler who falls off the roof, off the ladder, lands on his feet, fractures through that area. And then you get your gymnast who's constantly doing backward bends.
Mm-hmm.
there's your fracture. They're the three mechanisms of injury to this structure, and they don't do it any other way. You don't fracture that by doing that. You don't bulge a disc by doing that. It's beautiful.
That completely makes sense.
Should teach that in university. Unfortunately, they don't. No matter how many years they're there. It's freaking obvious. And in fact, as I said, you can read Mackenzie's books and McGill's books. They all show it. And there's nothing ever been shown otherwise. It's straightforward science. Thank you to Borelli and Newton for that.
And I mean, and that really goes back to bracing. And I always teach bracing, like positioning is part of bracing.
Yeah.
Like people want to go, oh, well, it's just expanding your stomach. And I go, no, it's not. If you're not in the right position, it's not doing what you want it to do. You have to have the back in the right position in what I call the neutral spine, and then lock it down. And then the brace holds him in that position.
Spot on, because when you got this structure here and it's taking 20% of your body weight here and 80% here, when you put a load on it, perhaps you take the 20 off here and put 100 down here.
Right.
And that's what you do. You brace and you get set in that position. So you now got 100% load going through here, and you've done your 10,000 reps, and it's 18 months later. You can probably load up really nicely and safely.
That's true. Those are really good points. I mean, it's hard to believe that people don't understand that.
It blows my mind, and it only took me really a lot of years to go through to get to where I was to understand it, and to see it more clearly every single day.
How much of that, though, do you think was going to school and thinking you're going to school and you're going to be taught right, and then you kind of had to go, wait a minute, that they weren't necessarily teaching me what I needed to know. I need to go into this on my own and research it more.
Yeah. As I said, the day I left, the day I started work, I was told to become, the best in the world or something. Well, that was everything after I'd left university. University taught me anatomy. That's about it. Didn't teach biomechanics to any reasonable level other than passing a few exams on it.
Right.
So I could calculate forces, but it didn't really give me the understanding of what really takes a long time to accept that it will take a long time to learn and become competent at. So yeah, when I finished, that's when I had a quest, and I turned around to my best mate and said, "What are we both most shit at after leaving university?" And we both turned around and said, "They taught us nothing on lumbar spines. It was effective." Great. So the path begins. So I went into the Mackenzie Spinal Institute and did the postgraduate program immediately. Did my exams actually in Madison, Wisconsin, after I'd graduated in Australia. And it's kept going. Met Professor McGill. I read all his work before I'd ever met him. So it's always been, plus then you've got all the great lifters I've always worked with and learned from. They're all the people who contribute all the weight training science on top of the anatomy science, on top of the biomechanics. Well, you don't learn that in a couple of years at university.
Yeah.
It's all after university.
But again, I like that thinking, because it's like, wait a minute, if I want to learn how backs are, why don't I go to the people that are putting the most stress on it and what they're doing to stay healthy? And then even if you did want to just help regular people, you still have a way more advanced knowledge of what's actually going on.
Yeah. The mother has hurt her back, and she's, can't bend over into the dishwasher, can't pick up the baby. Yeah. Well, I got to teach her to move like a powerlifter.
Yeah.
I got to make her hip dominant.
And I do like with my one, I talked about Mark earlier. I train his wife too. She's 74. I train him. It's similar to powerlifters. I'm training him to hinge. I'm training him to brace. And I remember the first day. Well, first of all, she had osteoporosis. Within 6 months to a year, she got retested. No more osteoporosis.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And then she comes in one day and she's like, "Yeah, I had this huge pot at the bottom of my cabinet." And she goes, "I just remembered what you said. And I squatted down and I grabbed it and I stood right up." And she goes, "It was easy. And that's always usually a pain."
Oh, man. That's it. Squatting and deadlifting are two fundamental human movements. We had to squat down and pick things up. Put things on our shoulders. Move.
Yeah, that's what we do.
So
move.
That's two fundamental movements human beings should be able to perform.
I do. So I have another thought that I'm gonna run by you here. I've thought about taking my powerlifters and giving them a day where they have to go like play catch or play basketball, or
Make sure you video it.
because I know so many powerlifters that don't move.
Mm.
And actually, I'll start again this summer. During the summer, the winters are kind of shitty to get outside here, but I'll make them do medicine ball work on our recovery days because I want to get them twisting and moving and throwing. And at one point, I had a group of like, I think it was 6 guys. So I took them to the park across the street from my house, and I made them play volleyball with a 20-pound medicine ball.
Oh,
And they had a blast, first of all, but they were actually getting out and moving. And I think one of the things powerlifters do is they just don't move enough. Like,
for sure.
just get out and
Absolutely.
move and do something.
Yeah, you can certainly plan that with just good, fun games like that.
Mm-hmm.
It works beautifully. What a good idea. Get people moving, and that will definitely make them healthier.
Yeah. And I kind of
Okay.
noticed that when I had a couple football players and I put them in with some of my power lifters. And then I'm like, all right, we're doing strongman events today. And I'm like,
Mm.
man, my football players just kicked the fuck out of my power lifters. And I'm like,
Of
they
course.
can't lift as much as the power lifters, but doing strongman events, they did a whole lot better.
Oh, they're athletes.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
I'm
whole
kind of like,
thing.
maybe my power lifters need to be more athletic as well.
Well, I've always found that good overhead presses tend to be very good benches as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a strongman carryover quite nicely. There's a lot of things you can do that will absolutely build you better.
Yeah.
And it's interesting there, it almost takes me to the second most important part of advice I ever got. I got the first one, telling me I had to go do something special. The second one was I was doing some research at a hospital. I was doing these rounds in certain hospitals. And after the first week of working in this new hospital, I come to work on the Monday, and the head of the department took me into the office and just said, "Stop fixing people." He goes, "You're wasting your time." He goes, "All you're doing is you know what works." And he goes, "That's not why you're here. You're here to learn." So he said, "You're banned from doing anything you know works with these patients." And he goes, "It's a public hospital. They're here for you to practice on." And that was straight up. And so the thought was there, you are now banned from doing what you know works because that's been limiting you mentally. Learn what you don't know. And that's been my career opener for the rest of my life. Question everything. The stuff I know. What don't I know? How does this affect that? How does this do this? Has anyone tested what glutes do on lumbar spine movement? Has anyone tested this movement? Has anyone tested that movement? What's the relationship between things? And that's been my career development, was finding out all the things that I'd taken for granted and to make assumptions on. So if I got an assumption, I test it. And guess what? Sometimes I find my assumption was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that would never have happened until somebody told me, stop doing what you know works. And that helps a lot in becoming better at seeing more things that will be useful.
That totally makes sense to me. When you first said it, I'm like, wait a minute, your job is to help people. But I mean, it's kind of the same approach I take to strength training. And even now, I remember I was having lunch with Ed Cohen one time, and he's like, "Man, Chad, I feel like I still have so much to learn." And I was like, "Well, holy crap, Eddie, you're the GOAT. If you got more to learn, I'm fucking way behind." But now, especially now that don't really care about competing anymore, I'm like, okay, I know what works. I know how to make people strong. But are there other ways? Are there maybe better ways? So especially with my own training, I'm like, you know what? I wonder if I did this, what would happen? And then I'll do it with me, and I'll be like, okay, that seemed to work. Let me test it out. And with my clients, I don't really just go, hey, here. I'll be like, hey, I got an idea. Here's why I think this will work. Can we try it? And they're like, oh, definitely. If you want to try it, let's do it.
Or it doesn't work and then you throw it out.
Yeah.
But at least you know.
Yeah. We had when I had my team and I was competing more, it was funny because I would come in sometimes with this huge grin on my face. And my teammates would go, son of a bitch. They're like, what did you dream of last night? And I go, oh, wait till we do this one today. I literally would dream up exercises and come in and go, we're going to try this. And granted, a lot of them didn't end up doing shit, but a lot of them actually worked pretty good.
Isn't it the best? We are never bored in our work.
No.
That's what Eddie's saying there. We're never going to be bored. We're
Yeah.
always going, damn, this is interesting. I found something else out, thought something else through. Let's test it. And
And
maybe, was the load enough? Was the frequency enough?
mhm.
There's a lot to it.
Yeah, it's I tell people, I go, strength is like an unsolvable puzzle that I still really, really want to solve, and I just enjoy doing it.
Mm.
Even though I know I'm never gonna conquer it, because there's just too much to it.
It'd be boring. It'd be screwed if we knew it all.
Yeah.
Even the things that we do know, we're finding better ways of understanding what we know.
Hmm.
And that's a great part too. It doesn't mean we always have to learn something that's different. We may learn what we're doing better.
Yes.
Yeah. It's the most beautiful pursuit.
And that's honestly, even if I tweak something, like I've been working on a back thing that I finally got figured out, but it was like, you know what, this whole experience was a new thing for me to test my knowledge to figure out what it is. And it kind of baffled me for a while. And I finally got it locked down. And it was like, I learned a ton from this. So like, this isn't a bad experience to me. This is a good experience because I learned from it.
Oh, so good. And
And
then you write it down.
I haven't, but I will when I get completely done with it.
I love discovering new shit and then going through my old books and realizing I wrote the fucking thing down 10 years ago as well.
Yeah, I do that too. But I don't know I'm not as old as I am. It just surprises me. I had one of my buddies, I'm like, how old's Mackenzie? And he's like, oh yeah, she's like 28 now. I go, what? Like, I babysat her. When the hell did that happen?
Yeah,
but it's because like strength is so funny. And I mean, if I look back on my career a lot in terms of trying to learn as much as I can, like maybe I learned some stuff that I didn't let sink in. And if I go back over it, I can pick out more things. And it was like, you know what, you're in this constant change. What worked at 20 might not work at 40, might not work at 50. What worked at 400 pounds doesn't work at 800 pounds. Like there's just always all these different factors that are moving and changing.
I'll throw you a beautiful one on that, and it's evolutionary, okay? Is that our bodies, as far as evolution are concerned, has the sole purpose of mating and breeding.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what it is. It's a selfish gene. The whole point of our human body is that we are here to breed, and that's what animals do, and that's what evolution's about. So once you're passing basically the major breeding ages, you do notice that arthritis and things like that start to appear a bit more often. And of course, you get the tissue breakdown and you get the changes in the body. And that's because evolution doesn't give a rat's ass about what happens to you after your peak breeding age.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this beautiful body that is essentially peaked for the breeding years. But once we pass that, evolution has not had to deal with that because that's where our genes are already passed on. So we do have these things such as our wonderful knees, which are perfect for running, jumping and loading and doing things. But yeah, osteoarthritis and degeneration will occur in everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? It's a function of the fact that's the way the tissue was optimized for the breeding years. And it's going to change. So you're never going to have this idea that, hey, guess what? You know, by doing everything, I'm going to maintain my youthful body. No, bullshit you are.
Mm-hmm.
Evolution's got a lot to say about that. And essentially, that's why older people get stiffer. Yeah. Guess what? You get stiffer. All the good shit got used up. But you can still load it. You can still do wonderful things with it.
Yeah.
But that's how we change.
That's fun. That's so interesting. I've never actually thought about it from that perspective. But yeah, as soon as our breeding years are over, it kind of just starts changing big time.
It did its job.
Yeah.
It got us to there.
It makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Yeah. And there's the science behind how things basically do occur naturally.
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural process of having such a great body to breed with and get our mates with,
right,
in fundamental hunter-gatherer society and through evolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's optimized. We're wonderful apex predators.
That's why I never understood the people that have a really hard time with aging. I'm like, yeah, I want to do what I can to stay as youthful and active as I can for as long as I can, but it's part of life. It happens. It's going to happen.
Yeah, and the idea that if you put each joint in your body through its full range of motion at least once a day, you'll probably move damn well all your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think a lot of people tend to get their age in their head.
Mm.
Like, oh, I'm older, I can't do that. Well, bullshit. The reason it hurts to run is because you haven't run in 30 years.
Yeah.
Like, if you
That's
start
right.
running gradually and build it back up, you'll be fine.
And maybe you should do a few activations before you run.
Yeah,
Maybe you
and
should get your abs working. Now we'll set up a little bit of work. And maybe you'll run, a quarter of a lap of a football field and then
yes.
walk a quarter of a lap. Just begin.
That's actually true. It's very interesting to me. I'll be thinking about this podcast for a few days at least. The way you describe the activation and the fact that like this is the way our body's made. So
Mm.
your job is completely against that. So some of these activations you need to do all the time.
All the time.
And that's
I
and
have a
that's
lot.
kind of the same thing. And now you got me thinking, like with some of my older clients who can't do the scat, like they
Yep,
lost the control of it. Well, that's the same thing. They've gone so long in their life never using it that it's gone.
very much. Here's a little hack for them, all right? You get them to put their hands down by their side and tell them to rotate their thumbs backwards as far as they can, open. Now, as they open what happened to your shoulder blades?
Yeah.
So all they
That's
got to do is they
simple
got
too. That's so simple.
and they don't have to think about retracting their scapulas. You give them the hand cue, open your thumbs as far as they can,
Ooh,
and the shoulder blades retract.
I'm gonna work on. I got a client. I'm gonna work on that tomorrow. I'm gonna have him do that.
Every hour of the day, they are to do that at least 5 times. There you are. That's a simple thing. And then they can do that when they're away from you because that's the time you need the volume of and frequency of work.
Right.
So for
See,
the
I just
working
learned
people,
something awesome and simple.
the simple things work, don't they?
Yeah, I
That was
love the simple
and,
things.
and that was how we just connected your hands to your shoulder blades. That was just
Hmm.
beautiful. It
That
connected
easy. Yep.
movements. And another one I get my back patients often to do is they're going to put a band around their knees, a little booty band, and every hour at work, they will do 25 abductions against it.
That seems
Because
really good too, because that's really simple, but it's going to get their glutes activated throughout the day instead of these long runs without activation.
yeah, simple thing to do. And they can sit there, still work, do 25 reps. You've got a long plane flight, take your band, do 25 reps.
Hmm.
Now, I did that with the tank drivers in the Australian Army where I was at a little while ago. And they said that made a huge difference because they can put a band in the tank.
Right.
So they got to be in there for hours. They'll bang out 25 reps. And they said, man, we move better afterwards.
You know what'll help? I'll bet that'll help too, because a lot of people when they're on long flights and stuff like that, they'll get a lot of edema in their lower legs,
Yeah.
and I'll bet that'll actually help pump some fluid and stuff through there as well.
Yep. Do your calf raises, do your glute activations against the band, and you'll get out the other side and you'll move pretty well.
I
Then put
like
your
it.
hands on your hips. And for most people, put your hands on your hips and bend backwards 5 to 10 times before you pick up your luggage off the carousel.
Hmm.
Because if it's really stiff and you don't have a condition called spondylolisthesis, which precludes you from doing that, and you're a relatively normal person, then after you've done a few reps, you probably centered the nucleus so that even if you bend over, you're okay.
Yes.
But I get a lot of that.
Yeah, that's one
So,
thing I like to have all of my clients. I'm like, dude, just lay on your stomach and your elbows for a little bit.
oh, so good.
Like, just get
For
your
most people.
back in the opposite position of where you're always putting it.
Pretty much, yep. That's a 99.9% person that you're going to be able to do that with almost, yeah.
And I think I wish I could get people to understand that just that concept. Like you can't move because you haven't been moving. And
Yep.
your body's made to move, and it's made to move in every single plane in all kinds of different directions.
When you're on your feet out in the savannah chucking spears, that's the idea. You're supposed
Hmm.
to be ready to go hunt. Are you ready to hunt when you go start training? Yeah, and start moving.
Hmm. It makes
The daily
sense. It makes a lot of sense. One of the things I've been coming up with lately, and with dealing with my low back thing, was I kind of started looking at how I move throughout the day.
Yeah.
Because somehow I stopped. I don't know how, but I stopped looking at that, and I started going, "Holy shit!" Like, you know why my QL's fucked up? Because I'm doing everything to one side all the time. I never go to my other side. And like one of the best things that helped me was starting to pay attention. And this one's a little gross, but like instead of wiping right-handed, I started wiping left-handed.
Mm.
And
And
honestly, that was a huge help to my back.
in certain parts of the world, you're only supposed to eat to wipe with your left hand because the right hand's the only one you're allowed to
The
eat
one
with.
you should to eat with it. Well, that's logical too, honestly.
So start practicing with the left hand because then you won't make any mistakes when you're in certain company in other countries.
But even like doing dishes and stuff, I notice like I'm always going to this one side and I need to mix things up and make sure. And I mean, if you go back to my blue collar upbringing, you find a guy that's really good at digging ditches, he switches all day long.
Ah, really, huh?
Yeah.
Mm,
So he'll shovel one way and then he'll switch and shovel the other way.
what a learned experience. That's great. Someone must have taught him and
Yeah.
probably had.
I mean, all the guys I know in construction that I've known, they all do that.
Wow. Isn't it the wisdom of the ages comes through? It gives you longevity in the job.
Hmm.
And a lot of people are concerned about imbalances in when they feel a muscle. And I usually tell them it's not overly important whether they feel the left and the right the same. And to emphasize the point, I get them to get a pen and I say, write your name on the piece of paper.
Hmm.
And then I say, now write it with the other side. And I look at it and I go, so does it look the same? And they go, no. I go, is there anything wrong with the other side? No. That's right. It's one hand's more skilled, the other isn't.
Right.
Doesn't mean we're supposed to be symmetrical. We do have certain things which are natural to us to be dominant to throw a ball
Hmm.
and dominant to kick a ball.
Hmm.
Don't have to do it. We don't have to make them even, but we like to have balance.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, where I think if it's so bad one way,
mm,
like there's a like a window again. It doesn't have to be
yeah,
perfectly balanced, but there's a point where it's too much. It's too different.
sure is. And there's the problems when that happens.
Because I
So
was
yeah,
thinking about it more like you talk about people in a I don't know. Do you guys drive on the right or the left? You guys are like us, right?
fuck, right hand drive here. Yeah, right hand.
We're left hand.
That's it.
It's on
Yeah,
the left side. So, but here in America, everybody always turns this way, and they're always turning. And I hardly ever see people turn the other way, and then people will start having problems with their neck. And I'm like, well, maybe
gotcha.
it's because you got great mobility on one side and you completely suck on the other side.
Yeah.
Like every now
Usually,
and then you should turn the other way a little bit.
yeah. I think it's a really good idea. It tests it out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, the things we do repeatedly.
So I
Yeah.
do
So
have a question for you.
go for it.
Your hair.
Yeah.
Is there you think a lot. So I see your hairdo and I'm wondering if there's more to it than just
Oh, I think it probably relates back to Mortal Kombat or something, probably.
mm-hmm. Okay, that's kind of what I thought. I kind of thought he's going to whip out some warrior haircut thing or something like that.
I'm going to give you the haircut story now. I haven't told this one out there before, but how it ended up that well, the final year at university, we had to do various rounds in different hospitals. And my final round was at a certain hospital on cardiothoracic work. And was well known that the supervisor there, every 3 students that would come in, she would fail 1 and pass 2. Didn't matter how good you were, someone out of the 3 is going to fail. That's what she'll do to you. She got the sack a few years later for being that way. But I was there and I looked at it and go, damn, I've got that hospital. And here I am. I'm a 275 pound and I've got long blonde hair. And I thought, I'm just going to be marked for death. I'm going to be the one. So the day before the clinic started, I shaved all my hair off and I shaved my eyebrows off. Now, because I thought, she's going to look at me and she's not going to know whether I've got something significantly genetically wrong with me or maybe what. And so it happened. We walked in, the 3 of us. There was myself. There was a relatively guy who would be in a background in any movie. You'd never notice him. He was the most normal person you'd ever seen. And then there was this young Indian guy who was with us, good friend of mine. And of course, she comes out and she's this little lady and she looked and I was the first one she looked at. And you could see the look on her face was, I don't know. And then she looked at the other guy next to me and she goes, yeah, okay. And then the face just turned to stone when she saw the Indian guy. And that was it. All three of us knew he was gone. And he knew it. And so when the exam came, they took me to the examination. They gave me the easiest examination you've ever seen. It was a pre-operative evaluation of a patient going in for a certain procedure. They pulled out magazines, sat there and read and said, "It's okay, we know you got a job when you finish." With him, they took him to the intensive care unit and there was lights and buzzers and shit going off everywhere, and they would just put him under the pump. And so that was the story of how I took my hair off. It was basically saying, I don't want to do another year at university for the one unit.
Yeah. Well, it worked out.
And after that, it was, what am I going to do with it now? So I went to Mohawk after that. I just never looked back. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, there's the history of the hair.
That's funny.
But I'll let the eyebrows grow back.
You look funny without eyebrows, yeah.
I might have to do it next. I might have to do it for the American tour. Take them off, see if anyone notices.
I will.
I don't think my dear girl Julie will let me do that one. Yeah, so we're going to definitely be over. I think we're starting August 31st in Miami. Oh, we might be in Los Angeles at El Luchador Barbell Club first, and then we'll head over to Battle Axe Gym down there in Miami. We'll start 31st of August and 1st of September, and then we're going to be doing our tour. I think we're up in New York on October the 5th for Strong New York. And we're just filling in all the workout dates for about 10 weeks.
That's awesome.
So
That's awesome you get to do that.
Yeah, make sure I catch up with everybody.
Yeah.
I miss all my good.
Well, I think it's great that you're getting out there and like you put up so much great content, and this is definitely something that strength sports is missing. Like there's just, I guess you want to call it meathead mentality. And it's like, dude, you can have the meathead mentality and you can want to train hard, but why not do all these other things? You can add them in easy enough.
Sure
That's going to help your numbers. And in the long run, why are we doing this? I'm doing it because I wanted to put up big ass numbers. That's why.
That's why we're here, isn't it? Huh?
Mm-hmm.
To do that little bit extra. So yeah, currently I've got an online 12-month lumbar spine course for people to do. So it's an online mentorship that I run now. So that's online with me.
How does that work? Do they have so many hours when they're online with you?
There's the basic course manuals, lectures, and exercise library, and then there's like 12 modules,
mm-hmm.
and then if you got the mentoring, you get 12 months of different more included work every month that comes in, and I have a Facebook group that people ask Q&A, and then there's those people who do it. There's about 30 people we have the extras on, and they do an hour with me every month. But at the end of it, you get to do the certification exam that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's a 12-month process, but it's to just give everyone the basics, science, and the application of what it takes to be really damn good at what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our love. Now it's education.
And I really do think, I remember I've dated a couple physical therapists, and like, even with the bracing, I'm like, I know you have a master's degree, know you have a doctorate, you're teaching bracing wrong.
Yeah.
And I've had to take a couple of them, and I'm like, come on, let's go out in the gym. And I show them and teach them, and they're like, oh my God, this is way better. And I go, yeah, just because you learned it in school doesn't mean it's right.
Not only is it right, but the most influential professor we have in Australia is a fellow called Peter O'Sullivan. He has never rehabbed a single lifter that I have ever heard of. He has been out writing papers for over 25 years. He tells people to let your tummy hang out and don't brace. And he's the guy who everyone follows for education because he's Peter O'Sullivan. Well, guess what? Pete's never rehabbed a lifter that I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I see, he's got no clinical success. So as I always say to people like that, get some calluses on your hands, not on your freaking fingertips. Shut the computer. Go out and lift. Learn about it. But he just sits in his chair and he writes and tells and educates these people who are coming out with doctorates of physical therapy who are saying, oh, there's no evidence that you should brace. And that's the bullshit that comes out of the universities now that they're educating across the world with.
Mm-hmm.
because they don't understand that evidence is what happens in the gym. Evidence is what happens on the platform. That's the evidence.
Yeah.
It's not just a research paper that you don't understand.
Well, I think that goes down the rabbit hole of everybody on the internet saying, "Well, I have the science." Like, you have a study, but who paid for the study? Who did the study? How many people is the study on? What controls did you have? Like, you can't just look and go, "Oh, they said science and said study, so they know what they're talking about."
Oh,
Like, you
you
got to
got
look
no
into it.
idea what they're talking about. It's frightening because there's a paper that was published that's absolute crap talking about is your back allowed to flex when you lift or not? And all it was only just simply an analysis of other papers, and the only papers they included were whether you lifted up something from basically 0 weight to 12 kilograms maximum.
Ooh.
So yeah, that's really applicable, isn't it? When a bar weighs 25 to start with,
Yeah.
and your physical therapist is going to go and quote that and say, "Oh, see, it doesn't matter whether you flexed or not because of this paper." And you go, "That paper only went to 12 kilograms." Of course, it doesn't freaking matter at 12 kilograms. But there's your doctor of physical therapy who's going to come out and quote that bullshit paper.
Yeah. And
Because they don't even read it.
actually get people hurt.
Yeah, it will get people hurt because they don't understand. And they don't understand movement. We're movement scientists. Powerlifters are movement scientists.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do. Good coaches are scientists. And we know by having looked at the previous scientists in front of us who have left the numbers, what works and what doesn't.
And it's more, I mean, I would say that's more science-based. I'm listening to people that have put up world records and put up huge numbers and coached other people to other huge numbers.
So don't be evidence-based. Be evidence-informed, clinically reasoned, and you'll become a successful individual. But don't be exercise-based. Don't become evidence-based. You become evidence-informed. That means you know how to discern between good papers and bad papers.
That kind of goes back to what you said earlier about always continuing to learn. Like, don't go, "Oh, I know this. Oh, I can make people stronger." Like, no, always keep learning. How can you do it better? How can you do it more? What things could you do different?
And don't tell people how to lift if you've never lifted anything half heavy in your life.
Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to, so like when I first started out, Brent Mikesell had recently broken the squat record at like 1,045 or something.
Mm.
And then he went up 1,060, 1,070, like 1,100, or like just under 1,100. And then Goggins hit 1,100. And I remember in that time, I'm like, oh my God, like people's bones are going to snap or something. Like, it's got to be as high as it's going to be. And then bam, 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 bam. And I went, okay, that's it. I will never limit the human body. Like, the human body can just do crazy shit. And then eventually, like, I think Brent's was like 1170, and then I beat his with 1174. But now you look at guys that, you know, when I started, 1,000 pounds in gear was insane. Like, there was hardly any guys doing that. Now we got guys doing 1,000, and didn't Vlad do like 11 or something? Didn't somebody do like close to 11 raw?
Pretty sure.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. So, like, I'm always interested. First of all, I'm fascinated that we can keep pushing the limits.
Mm.
And I mean, even I look at Jimmy Cole benching 1,400 pounds. I get that the shirt's different. I get that there's this technology, but he's still supporting 1,400 pounds with his arms. Like, that's crazy. And so
not everyone can do it. That's a special person.
Yes. But even at that, it's like, okay, so I'm amazed that we can keep getting stronger, but I'm also fascinated by the science. I'm like, okay, well, like, I want to talk to these young guys. Like, I want to know, what are they doing different now to be at the level they are? Like, it keeps the technology or I shouldn't say the technology, the intelligence and knowledge keeps growing. And I think that's awesome and amazing.
Once you know somebody's done it, you know that it can be done.
Oh, I definitely think that there is a huge a huge factor to that. And because I've always talked about like the really strong mental people are the ones that break the record first and then continue to break it again. That's the person who gives two shits about what anyone else has ever done. They're like, I broke the record, and you know what? I can break it again. But yeah, it's funny how once someone breaks that record, immediately you'll have a couple other guys.
Like the famous 4-minute mile. No one had broken it until Bannister broke it.
Mm-hmm.
And once he broke it, people followed through.
Well, the same thing with the shot put and Ryan Krauser. That was like a 30-year-old record that Randy Barnes broke. He broke it, went 70, I think he went 76. And then two guys after that broke what was the original world record. And you're like, 30 years this stood. One guy breaks it, and then bam, two other guys break it.
And there it is. Here's an interesting one. Now, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. Now, I chased Bev Francis for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask her, Bev, you were the first female to bench press 300 pound.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bev used to run. I think she thought I was a stalker. But one day, every time she saw me coming, she'd disappear. One day, she didn't realize it. But we're both IFBB pro judges. And I'm sitting down, judge number one, and guess who has to walk along and sit next to me? It's Bev, judge number 2. I said, all right, Bev, I've got you now. How the hell did you ever bench? How were you the first person to bench 300 pound? And I said to her, it was like Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile. Well, she turned around and said to me, we both had the same coach.
Really?
A guy called Frank Danforth. So he was the guy who coached Bannister. He also coached Bev Francis.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And that was the beauty of it. And now the interesting thing is,
so did she say, I mean, there's more than that. Like he may have been the coach, but what was he doing to help her?
Well, what he did, she took because she was on an athletic scholarship to the University of Melbourne. And he told her to get into the weight room. And what she did is she took an athlete's approach to the weight room. So she said, I bench pressed, squatted, and deadlifted 7 days a week. Wow. Now, what does she do? Which makes it's an athlete. Well, that means although it might have been bench day on Monday, she still put a bar on her back and practiced squat technique. She still picked up a deadlift and practiced deadlift. Next day could have been squat day, but she still got on the bench and practiced technique. She still deadlifted, practiced technique. Then it's deadlift day, Wednesday, put a bar on the back, practice squat, get on the bench, practice bench, repeat. And
so she wasn't training heavy all those days, but
exactly.
She was doing technique.
Yeah, like an athlete.
For those lifts, which totally makes sense.
Yep, and that's how she got there, because she practiced bench technique 7 days a week. And you can see it. It makes sense. What you're doing is you're taking an athletic approach to sport, because, hey, do tennis players only hit the ball once a week? No, pro tennis players practicing twice a day. But they don't bash the ball. They practice technique.
Well, it was...
And they go and practice again.
I was talking to Shannon Hartnett one time about when she was doing Highland Games. And she goes, I hardly ever actually throw an implement. But she's like, I do drills every day.
Yeah. Well, it opens up our toolkit, doesn't it?
And I know when I was powerlifting, coming from a throwing background, I was an Olympic style squatter. So when I first started powerlifting, I didn't change it. It was knees over toes, buried them to the floor. And I was doing 550 for 5 sets of 5. And I went to my first seminar with Dave, and Dave's like, what the fuck is that? It just changed everything. And so I get back to the gym, and my hamstrings I was total quad dominant. My hamstrings were so weak, I couldn't squat 135 in a box right. So I'm like, okay, then I'm going to start from scratch, man. And where the squat rack was like where everybody walked into the gym. And like after like 20 minutes, I'm just flipping everybody off, going, just keep fucking walking. Just keep fucking walking, man. You'll see. Just keep walking. Because everybody's like, are you hurt? What's going on? And I'm like, shut up. Just get out of my face. And so one of the things that I did is I go, I'm going to squat. Every time I'm in the gym, I'm going to do 100 reps of squats.
Oh, man.
If it's no weight, it's a dowel rod on my back, I'm going to do 100 of these every time. And
Well, there you are,
within 6 months, I beat my best squat, and it just kept growing from there.
man. Ain't it a fact? You paid the price.
Yeah,
So
and
there's the science of record breakers.
and it's an
You,
interesting thing what you say about she looked at it like an athlete, because I've kind of, I was talking about my football players and stuff, and I've been thinking like it's weird that power lifters don't really think about things in terms of athletes. They still think of meathead. I got to go in here. I got to train a bunch. I got to train heavy. I got to do this. And there's like a really meathead mentality
mm,
and less of an athlete mentality.
very much. Yeah, and now we can start to add to the science of that, and that's a little bit of what I suppose Matt would be saying about the conjugate method.
Yes, I think he would completely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're still training, you're still recovering, you're still doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're not leaving something behind, you're still practicing something. Yeah, the beauty of the conjugate for the power.
And that's where a lot of times a lot of lifters are got to go heavy, got to squat, bench, and deadlift.
Yep,
And it's
well
like,
done that
I mean, a football player doesn't go crash his head into other football players all the time, every day. They do a lot of
one.
other
You leave
stuff.
you create the capacity to do that when you
Mhm.
have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what we're talking about there is a recovery to be able to have the capacity to do that.
Yes.
And that's essentially whether it's putting the biggest load in the world on your back or whether you're doing back rehab. You're basically creating capacity for performance. Whether your performance is daily life or it's record breaking, you create capacity for performance.
Which goes back to the 18th month before you can really deadlift. That whole time you're creating that capacity so that you
Mm,
can deadlift. So
you
yeah,
can load it
even
up.
in terms of rehab, that completely makes sense. Like, okay, you screwed your back up. Now we got to
Mm.
build that capacity back
Yes,
so that you
that's
can
the
do that.
biggest key to it. And pain is not the only indicator we use. Pain is just one thing.
Yeah.
Hey, that's we get rid of that one. You still got a fair way to go.
Yeah.
That's because those lumbar spine fusions apparently fail because the rehab was crap. Well, this whole thing, create capacity, create good movement patterns that allow you to have technical error if it occurs without getting injured.
I say that a lot with people that have like muscle tears.
Mm,
And I learned this because sometimes I'm dumb and I got to do things the wrong way before I learn. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
the first day that it feels good and you really want to go heavy, wait at least another week.
Oh,
I
too
go,
good.
just because it feels good doesn't mean it's ready.
Feelings are not everything. We always
Yeah.
say physics greater than feelings.
Yes. That's so true.
Yeah, it's the way we live, isn't it? I mean, I learned about how much carbs are important in a squat by tearing mine twice. Squatting, great. You
Hmm.
realise that the damn thing has to bring your knee back, it's your tibia back. Yeah,
Yeah, I think we're all a little hard headed. We learn better sometimes from making mistakes.
we definitely learn with more depth, don't we? More
Yes.
understanding.
Hmm.
Yeah, you got to earn it to know it. Can't read about it. You got to do it.
I truly believe you got to do it and experience it before you're gonna really learn it.
It's the best, isn't it? Well, it'll be time for me to enjoy getting into my training session today. Now
Yes,
we'll have
sir.
a bit of fun.
So where can people? I know you have. It's just. I think it's Doctor. Is it Doctor Andrew Locke on Instagram?
Just Andrew _Lock _strength.
Okay. And then where else can people find out more of this great shit you're putting out? It's great information.
That's the place. That's the place to find me. I direct everyone from there. But I
Okay.
have United Health Education is an education business I run with an osteopath, Danny Antonellis, and my dear Julie.
Okay.
The three of us work together at United Health Education, and you can Google that one. You'll find us,
Cool.
and my courses are there as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Sir,
great
I
to be-
appreciate you having you on. This was a cool talk. I learned a couple things, which is always great, and reinforced
So
some
did I.
other things, which is great because I watched your stuff and I'm like, I like this guy. I like what he's saying. I like the way he's approaching it. And
We're people who understand each other. We're a community, and that's what we always love, catching up with people in our community. It's always great to catch up and man, I can't wait to catch up in person when we get back over this time. All right.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Got to be done.
All right, sir. Thank you for having on, and maybe we'll get you back on again at some other point because I'm sure we got more we could talk about.
Always super, Chad. Fantastic and an honor to be able to be on today.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Courage Barbell Unlimited podcast. For more information, please visit CourageBarbell.com. Until next time.
Beautifully done.